The Nordstream pipeline has been in the news this week. The sabotage of the crucial pipeline connecting Russia and Germany has been on everybody's mind. And tonight, we will look into the likely culprits and speculate, since no one's probably going to know who actually did this for years, and it will probably wind up as some kind of disputed event, much like 9/11, that people will still be arguing about 10 years from now. So let's get into it. This, as you can see, is a map of all of the gas pipelines in Europe, and I have isolated the specific part that is Nord Stream. As you can see, it goes from Greifswald in Germany, just down here, all the way up to Vyborg in Russia, which is all the way up there. Now, the explosions occurred right near the island of Bornholm, which is right here. The actual explosions occurred just a little bit north and east of Bornholm. Both pipes were destroyed. The first we knew about it was a seismic report from I believe it was the Swedes, who reported 2 explosions that seemed to be about 100 kilograms of TNT each. Both sides have been blaming each other, the Russians and the Americans. Everyone's saying that the other side did it, and given that we are in a state of war, and you can't really trust anything that either side is saying at the moment, it's basically a toss-up as to who really done it. However, as I said, we shall do some speculating. 4chan, of course, was full of theories instantly. The best and most unreliable place to get your news on the internet was full of theories that a P-8A Poseidon, which is a mine-clearing and sort of submarine tracking plane, had launched what is known as an HAWWC torpedo, launched from the air, that went into the water, and then hit the pipeline. Some people are saying that they have been managing to track this plane on aircraft recording sites. However, I have not been able to confirm this independently. Supposedly, the high altitude WWC, some kind of like missile, basically it launches from the aircraft, it's computer controlled, it can split off and change its impact point, and they reckon that this was what hit the pipeline. There's a lovely picture right there. Very, very dramatic. I think this is from Lockheed Martin or whoever it is that makes this fantastic missile. However, there are some problems with this theory. The first one, of course, being that Russia has Kaliningrad just down here to the east of Bornholm. They have a whole crapload of radars there, and they would have picked up the launch. So if they did it this way, then the Russians presumably would have come out and said, we have radar footage of this plane going over. We have radar footage of them releasing a missile. I mean, I suppose there could be some kind of like crazy stealth thing going on. There's no way to know. They could be hiding missiles in their butts, but it seems unlikely. Indeed, the actual number of possible culprits are few. The explosions took place in relatively shallow water. We're talking about 60 meters, which is not large enough for a proper submarine to get in. Plus, the general vicinity is swarming with NATO ships and planes, and it would be a very, very dicey proposition indeed. Much more likely to be an underwater drone of some kind, or possibly it could have been explosives that were laid next to the pipeline God knows how long ago, and were detonated now. Indeed, there is this story from back in 2015, where an underwater drone with explosives was spotted near the original Nord Stream 1. It was disabled by the Swedish Navy, but it was never actually said who the drone belonged to. Indeed, the article basically says that they've got no idea who it belongs to, because these kind of drones are very, very common. It says that this was possibly a mine-clearing drone of some kind. Who knows? Who knows? We will probably, as I said, never know. So, let's do a little bit of speculating based on the principle of cui bono, or who would benefit from such a situation. First, the Russians. Now, of course, the Americans are saying, the Russians did it, but then the Americans would say that. Basically, at the moment, anything bad that, happens to the Russians is the fault of the Americans. Anything bad that happens to the Ukrainians is the fault of the Russians, and so on, ad infinitum, because it's war, and truth is the first casualty of war. Now, in terms of possible reasons as to why Russia would blow up their own pipeline, I have seen people say that it was an attempt to drum up support for the war in Ukraine, which is apparently not very popular in Russia. I wouldn't know. Apparently, by striking their own oil pipeline, Putin can basically say that, they're under attack. This seems like a very, very flimsy kind of reasoning, to be perfectly honest. Possibly that it was a way to demonstrate their commitment, cutting off their nose to show how serious they are. Again, this is also a kind of unsatisfying explanation. The Russians could have simply turned the taps off and not wasted the approximately 500 million cubic meters of gas that was filling the entire pipeline. The US alleges that there were Russian ships in the area, but Kaliningrad is the home to I believe it's the 5th Baltic Fleet of the Russians, so that's not really saying much. There's going to be Russian ships in the general area anyway, and it would look a little bit sus if a Russian ship just parked over the pipeline and, I don't know, released a drone of some kind. I think it is probably much more likely that the explosives were pre-planted. And this, of course, moves us on to the USA. Now, the Americans are a much more likely candidate. They have both the means and they have the motive. Both Biden and Nuland have made comments about shutting down Nordstream at one point or another. Indeed, there is the famous clip of Biden basically saying that we're going to shut down Nordstream 2, and when asked how he was going to do it, he just replies, we can do it.
Mr. President, I have wanted to ask you about this Nordstream project that you've long opposed. You didn't mention it just now by name, nor did Chancellor Scholz. Did you receive assurances from Chancellor Scholz today that Germany will in fact pull the plug on this project if Russia invades Ukraine? And did you discuss what the definition of invasion could be?
Let me answer the first question first. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will. I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Now, perhaps this was a tacit admission by Biden that they already had planted such explosives. If they had, I don't know how they'd set them off. Maybe you'd fly a plane over it and transmit the detonation signal. I don't really know. Maybe you could do it from satellite, for all I know, right? I just really, really don't know. The US is on record as having said that they want Europe to move closer to the US when it comes to energy and gas in order to move them away from Russia. Of course, blowing up both Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 it already has massively hurt Russia. It has also prevented any kind of real rapprochement between the Russians and the Germans. So, as the Germans are heading into a very, very cold winter with the prospect of their entire heavy industry sector shutting down for lack of energy, it's not like they can go crawling back to the Russians and say, oh, well, look, hey, how about we just, sort of forget this whole thing and you send us more gas. That is now off the table. And the Germans now really have no one left to rely on apart from, well, the Norwegians, really. Now, to support this theory, we have this report from the Rand Corporation from 2019. Extending Russia, competing from advantageous ground. Now, this is quite a long document, but I'm just going to read a couple of segments for it. Now, the basic premise is that the West can defeat Russia by causing them to overextend themselves. The purpose of this project was to examine a range of possible means to extend Russia. By this we mean non-violent measures that could stress Russia's military or economy or the regime's political standing at home and abroad. The steps we posit would not have either defense or deterrence as their prime purpose, although they might contribute to both. Rather, these steps are conceived of as measures that would lead Russia to compete in domains or regions where the United States has a competitive advantage, causing Russia to overextend itself militarily or economically, or causing the regime to lose domestic and or international prestige and influence. This report deliberately covers a wide range of military, economic, and political policy options. Its recommendations are directly relevant to everything from military modernization and force posture to economic sanctions and diplomacy. Consequently, it speaks to all the military services, other parts of the US government that have a hand in foreign policy, and the broader foreign and defense policy audience. So, that's the basic idea. So this goes into a rather detailed examination of Russia's gas situation, noting that although Europe is diversifying away from Russian gas, it is still very, very dependent on it, and that Nordstream 2, because this was written, I believe, back in 2019, before Nordstream 2 had come online, was going to make the problem worse. Quote, a variety of options exist for diversifying European gas supplies and extending Russia economically, although it is not clear how much control the United States has over them. A first step would involve stopping Nord Stream 2. In 2015, the EU imported 410.6 BCM of natural gas, of which about 1.21 came from Russia. Nord Stream 2 at full capacity would account for 45% of 2015 imports from Russia, 14% of total imports. Conclusion. Reducing Russian market power over gas consumption in Europe would certainly extend Russia economically. It would reduce Russian pricing power and could create a situation in which the European threats to purchase gas elsewhere could become the new version of Russian threats and actions to cut off gas to European consumers. The most important flaw in this area is that creating new, non-Russian gas supplies for Europe would be more expensive than continuing to purchase Russian pipeline gas. In the early 1980s, President Reagan had to retreat when he sought to constrain energy technology exports in an effort to encourage Europe not to become too dependent on Russian gas. Any similar effort today might meet the same fate. Therefore, this policy could require both planning to make sure it is as efficient as possible and cost sharing to make sure all countries that would benefit would have an incentive to participate. Now, this seems all relatively benign. However, there is another leaked Rand report that is doing the rounds, supposedly. Again, this is from 4chan, so there is no way to know whether this is an official Rand report. In fact, it does look a little bit Mickey Mouse. Although, the basic thrust is that if the gas supply to Germany from Russia is cut, then heavy industry will have to move from the EU to the US. Again, I'm not sure if that's true. It could move to many other places. It could move to India. It could move to China, although the COVID measures for China are going to make that a little bit difficult. But essentially, there are rumblings that due to the war in Ukraine, you got to remember the explosions happened literally at the same time that the votes in the annexed territories of Ukraine were concluded. The Americans may have decided, right, that's it, enough of that malarkey, blow the pipeline. Particularly if they happen to find out that the Germans were considering cutting a deal with the Russians because they saw how dire their situation was getting in the winter. Other possible belligerents who could have done this. Ukraine. Seems unlikely. They don't really have the capability as far as I'm aware, and Bonhomme is a long way from Ukraine. Seems kind of unlikely. Although I'm sure they're very, very happy, because now the only way that Germany can get gas is through Ukraine and Poland, as I'll show you here. There's Russia up the top. And all of these pipelines run through Ukraine to get to Poland and then on to Germany in the west. About the only other route that the gas can travel is down through Turkey, up through Bulgaria and Romania, and then through Hungary and Austria. And I'm not sure how large those pipes are and whether it's sustainable. There have also been rumblings that it was the UK. The UK has the Special Boat Service, which is basically like the SAS, but they're all underwater and shit. Again, there's no real way of knowing. The UK is certainly very much on board with the whole Ukraine war thing, and I have a feeling that if the Americans asked them to do it, they would, or maybe they just decided to do it themselves, or maybe it was like, fuck the Germans. Maybe the UK sees economic benefit in it. Again, who knows? From the UK's perspective as well, they also have North Sea gas. Unlike the Germans, they have quite large gas fields and a fat pipeline to Norway, as you can see here. These are all the North Sea gas fields that the UK is plugged into, and a massive fat bunch of pipelines that come in on the northwest of the island. The big winner out of all of this actually is going to be Norway. Yes, plucky little Norway. Who are now basically, it seems, the major gas supplier to pretty much all of Europe. I mean, apart from liquid natural gas that is going to be shipped by boat, all of the gas is going to be coming from Norway. So perhaps it was the Norwegians. I always thought they were up there in the north, kind of minding their own business, being generally Scandinavian, eating smoked fish or whatever it is the Norwegians eat, something probably shady. And no, they're out there sabotaging their competitors' oil pipelines so that they can get that sweet, sweet candy. I don't know. I mean, I guess buy Norwegian energy stocks would be my guess. The only other possible explanation, I guess, would be potentially a third country looking to expand the war between NATO and Russia. Or, I guess, speculators, maybe it's like, George Soros gone rogue, or, the Saudis or something. I don't think the Saudis have that kind of like reach, but you never know. It could have, one thing is for certain, energy prices in Germany are going to rise massively. It is going to massively, massively hurt German heavy industry and manufacturing to the point where they may have to start just switching plants off, which is going to really, really have a negative effect. Some of these plants, like for example, aluminium smelters, chip fabricators and stuff, these are always on facilities. Once you shut them down, it takes months and months and months. You've got to clean out the entire thing to start them up again. So, what happens now, of course, is the big question. Well, it looks like the EU economy is going to basically collapse. Heavy industry is going to be crippled. The Germans seem like they are already using much more gas than they had anticipated. Although their storage tanks are full, these storage tanks are not meant to tide them over in the winter, despite what people were saying in the press. They are just designed to be a buffer, a bit like your fridge. You don't go to the grocery store every single time you want to eat something. You go to the grocery store, you buy a bunch of stuff, you store it in your fridge. But if the grocery store goes away, you can't survive out of your fridge for very long. And Germany's gas storage facilities are a bit like this. Stock market already seems to be massively on the brink. At the moment, everything's going down. There are persistent rumors of a looming bank default. Word on the street is either Deutsche Bank or Credit Suisse are about to go under, which is going to trigger another Lehman Brothers moment, except possibly quite worse. Nobody knows. Stock market roulette, banking roulette. I hope everyone has at least a little bit of money outside the banking system in case there decides to be a bank holiday or something like that. Hey, it happened to Greece, and at the moment, the interest rate on UK bonds is very, very high. We are approaching sort of Portugal, Greece levels at the moment, which is quite scary. Usually, the UK has pretty low interest rates on bonds. It's creeping up to, I believe, 5.4% at the moment, which is outrageously high. However, if things get bad enough and German industry closes down, that will at least free up more gas for, the actual people shivering in their homes. Although a lot of those people shivering in their homes will not have jobs, and the German current account balance will basically go to zero, which I believe it's already at, actually, because they are finding it terribly hard to export anything, presumably because it's insanely expensive to manufacture stuff there. Anyway, that is the end of my speculation. If you enjoyed this analysis, please like, share, comment. We're now on YouTube as well. Malinformed is the name of the channel. I feel very dirty participating in YouTube. It makes me feel a bit icky inside, but I have sucked it up and decided. So if you want to join us on YouTube so you can see my stuff pop up in your YouTube browser, please do. And I'll see you again soon. Good night.